This is the story of a boy who from the moment he was born was despised by his parents. His name is Davin, and his misfortune was to be born on the same day and at the same time as Khajan, a child blessed by the sword god Keshak. Born with a blessed body and talent, Davin's mother only wished her son was Khajan instead of him. She and his father were disappointed in Davin, one of the reasons being that he was missing his right arm. His mother would whisper to him every night that he should die. Davin was aware of this and apologized to her, not knowing why he was despised. He did not want to die. When Davin was not yet born, he heard his father say that he was the hope. At that time, they were looking forward to Davin, as his father could never beat his older brother. But he hoped that when Davin was born, that child would be better than his brother's son. Davin's father expected him to defeat Khajan, yet he was born with only one hand and without the blessing of a god. And the mere fact that he was born crushed all his father's hopes. While Khajan played with a smile and had begun to walk, Davin still struggled to get up. When Davin learned to take his first steps, Khajan was already holding a blade. The first time Davin held a blade, Khajan had already experienced mana and began to train Samian swordsmanship. At some point, Khajan became the object of Davin's adoration and envy. When he was 7 years old, he was sent as one of Khajan's assistants. Outwardly, it was known that he was sent as an aide to support Khajan, but the reality is that his parents sold him for 300,000 luden. As they grew up, Khajan took advantage of him, because from the beginning, Davin was an annoyance to him. That's why Khajan took his anger out on Davin, who had no choice but to hold back his tears. It was hard for him to bear the fact that the adults who passed before him turned a blind eye to the situation. Davin's uncle was known as an amazing man, but he left the family a long time ago and never came back. That's why there was no one to control Khajan, so he grew up as a boss. He easily beat everyone. He had superior talent and the blessing of the sword god. Next, he would face Davin, who was jealous of Khajan's strength and talent. Khajan despised the look on Davin's face and went all out against him, as he couldn't bear to be seen that way by someone with no arm. Khajan tells Davin that he can work hard all his life if he wants to, but he will never be able to achieve his strength. Davin wants to win, he really wants to, but his dreams can't be achieved by hard work alone. Khajan got lazy with his training as he grew up, sinking into alcohol, girls and drugs, and still Davin was not able to beat him. Khajan was a genius who didn't work and Davin was an idiot who worked hard. But he is clear about one thing: their positions will not be the same forever. After many fights, the most significant one came for Davin. After exchanging a few blows, for the first time he got the upper hand against Khajan. After blinding him, he quickly approached him to deliver a direct blow, with which he finally managed to defeat Khajan. Up to that point, the head-to-head record was 21 fights and 21 losses to Khajan. But after 29 years, Davin was able to beat him, despite all the times he lost and people telling him to give up, mocking him for being a talentless idiot. But still, he won and everyone shouted his name. Khajan couldn't bear to lose to Davin. At that moment, Davin heard the words that fell on his ears when he was younger, the words of contempt that his parents said to him. Davin tells Khajan that if it were him, he wouldn't have lived that way. He wouldn't have wasted his life on alcohol and drugs. He makes it clear that he would have lived a more meaningful life than stepping on the weak. By the time Davin turns to leave thinking it's all over, Khajan runs his sword through his chest, leaving everyone stunned. Khajan, an idiot to the end. Despite defeating Khajan, there was no way Davin would live. The Sun Blade Greatsword that only the direct line of the Samian family uses also contains Samian family mana with anti-magic properties, meaning that unless the miraculous Saint Layla appeared, there was no way Davin would survive. Before closing his eyes, Davin tells Khajan that he will always be remembered as a loser. Surprisingly, Davin later wakes up tied up, believing he is in hell. But this masked guy tells him that he is a lucky guy, as the miraculous Saint Layla was present in the arena and healed Davin. Despite that, his whole body was broken and all he could do was breathe. Next, this guy asks Davin if he signed a contract with the devil. Davin is surprised to hear such a statement, but the guy mentions that his parents admitted it, so it is useless to deny it. Besides that, bottles with Davin's blood for the contract with the devil were found in his family's house. They accuse him of being a demon who sacrificed 300 innocent children to make himself stronger. Davin managed to defeat Khajan, but not the Samian family. After all, his own family chose Khajan over him. Because of all these accusations, Davin is sentenced to life imprisonment and having his mana sealed. Davin's sinews were cut and his mana was sealed through many chains, and so he was taken to prison, where he receives a visit from Khajan, who laughs at him. Khajan managed to become a sword emperor and people praise him for being a hard-working genius. This idiot thanks Davin for everything, as it was thanks to him that he achieved all that. After Khajan humiliated him and left, the food they brought Davin decreased a lot, to the point where they stopped feeding him. Davin was starving. He thinks it would have been better to die in the arena than to die this way. Davin collapses and wonders if he had both arms his life would have been different. If only he had been of direct lineage. If only he had had the blessing of the sword god. If only he had had that, would his life have been different? Davin refuses to die, and although it seems that is what will happen, he does not believe he is dead after all. Davin opens his eyes again in confusion. He is called by the name Vincent and a kind of familiar person is holding his right arm. It is an adult from one of the family branches. He wonders how he knows him, but more importantly, why did he just call him Vincent? Is it a dream? Vincent is the seventh son of Adinka. He thinks he is in a dream, and it doesn't seem so bad. The air feels fresh unlike the prison he was in. Plus he has his right arm. The person in front of him keeps holding his arm and tries to inflict pain using mana. There he reacts. The method to block that kind of attack is to physically separate from the opponent. Davin pushes the guy back, although he is surprised, as it is not a strong enough attack to push someone back that far, then apologizes and tells him that his hand slipped. The guy gets up angrily and tells Davin that his son will crush him mercilessly, and that it will be the first time the filial family will crush the main family. The guy leaves while threatening him and tells him to wait for the day of the assembly of the real swords. But isn't this a dream? If so, he should have woken up by now. Then some memories start flowing back to him. His mother passed away after giving birth, while his father did not care about him at all. All the other children treated him like dirt. Of the 8 children of the famous Adinka sword family, he is Vincent, the 7th. He was such a coward that he cowered and cried in his room after being slapped by Loa, the youngest of the family. It's time to accept it. The Davin we knew from the Samian family has become the useless Vincent from the Adinka family, yes, reincarnated. The now Vincent doesn't understand how this happened. Next, he comes across a diary that Vincent used to despise himself. His self-esteem fell so low that he gave up on everything. Everything indicated that God had heard the prayers. Davin wanted to live in his last moments. He then wonders what happened to the original Vincent. Moments later, he hears a voice. This alerts him. He thinks it is a demon trying to trick him because his reincarnation should never have happened. But no, the one speaking to him was the original owner of the body he is in. Since the original Vincent gave him his body, he no longer has a name, so now he decides to call himself Julian. Vincent is facing a revelation, something the gods give to humans. He had heard that people blessed from birth can hear the revelation, which means that Julian is a god, a lesser one. Julian mentions that originally he had intended to call a spiritual god, but the now Vincent crawled instead. If Julian wants to become a true god and not a lesser one, he must achieve numerous accomplishments. This goes by the name of calling. If Julian completes his calling, he will be able to become a true god. Vincent tells him that he understands the circumstances, but makes it clear that he is not interested in his achievements. Because if everything is as Julian has said, that means that Vincent has earned himself a new life, which he will be busy living, so he will not have time to listen to the wishes of a ghost. Julian gave up his life and Davin wished for one. However, he mentions that the spiritual energy he has is very low, and if that energy disappears completely, Vincent's body will die. Vincent thinks it is a lie, as he notices that the body is too healthy for an early death. But soon after he collapses to the ground. From that moment on, Julian will show him the real memories, the ones where Vincent was treated like dirt. However, he notices something in the expression he had, which is why he comes to the conclusion that while Vincent was playing the coward, he was preparing to take revenge. Thoughts not at all suitable for a 13-year-old boy. Vincent wakes up and Julian asks him if he will listen to him now. Next, Julian asks Vincent if he knows the archdemon Davin and the hero King Khajan, which surprises Vincent greatly. This is something that happened 500 years ago. A one-armed swordsman, Davin, escaped from Samian prison and using a contract with a demon, devoured thousands of lives to become stronger. He is said to have killed over 10,000 people, so he is recorded in history as a great demon, but 500 years ago. Does that mean he traveled 500 years into the future? Things don't seem to make sense, but besides having the names Davin and Khajan, they are both from the bloodline of the Samian family. However, Vincent is sure that in his past life he died in that prison. The Samian family abandoned the one-armed man and chose the storm sword, while the one-armed swordsman died alone. The storm sword became the sword emperor, or so it is assumed. but to fabricate the story and refer to them as the great demon king and the hero. That is something that makes Vincent very angry. Julian jokes and tells him that Cajun was a friend who really loved Davin, which makes Vincent angrier, as he knows this is a made-up story. Julian asks Vincent if in the past life he was someone from that time. He then clarifies that the story is just a combination of stories that the victors left behind. Julian continues talking. He mentions that the king swallowed his tears and worked with the greatest hero of the time, his best friend, the Emperor of the Sun Sword, to defeat the great demon Davin. The Emperor of the Sun is Arslan, ancestor of the Adanka family. Vincent is surprised that this brat has become the first patriarch of the Adanka family, and is that Arslan was a boy who admired Davin a lot. This because when Arslan was young, he was a disciple of Davin. Arslan even visited him a few times while he was in prison. He was upset about what had been done to Davin and told him that he would make sure he got his honor back. But after he said that, he did not visit him again. Julian mentions that Arslan is the first patriarch of the Adanka family and left them the mission of their lives. It is something to do with Julian's achievement, overcoming the Samian family and facing the truth. Vincent thinks Arslan definitely told him that he would find out the truth. He was someone who knew how they had wronged Davin. Vincent is not sure, but Arslan Falker left the Falker family and created the Adanka family to face the truth. Adanka is a new family that was created to restore Davin's honor. Vincent supposes that it is destiny to be born into Arslan's family. Vincent asks Julian if by fulfilling his calling, he will become a true god, and the answer is yes. And if that happens, Davin will be able to become the true owner of Vincent's body, and if Julian becomes a god, he will be able to bestow a blessing on Vincent. It's a deal that benefits them both. Vincent thanks Arslan, takes a sword and says he will inherit the mission he left behind. He will surpass the Samian family, the family that betrayed him. Julian jokes with Vincent and calls him old, because if he is someone from 500 years ago then he is an old man, isn't he? After walking for a while, they arrive at a training match. Vincent wonders what kind of martial arts the people of that time will use. He is interested to know how much martial arts have improved over 500 years. He also wonders how strong the descendants of Cajun have become. However, his body feels heavy to the point where he faints. The body he has now is not very good. It is in such a bad state that if he does not use mana to control it, he will not be able to live a normal life. After meditating for a while, he senses a flow of mana and calls out to Julian, then complains to him why he didn't learn to wield the sword when he used to have that body. Julian replies that he had a disability that did not allow him to learn it. However, Vincent tells him that he has the heavenly exoskeleton, so he should have learned to use the sword. Julian doesn't even know about Exohat. Vincent mentions that with the heavenly exoskeleton, he is able to store mana in any part of his body, more exactly, in his bones. Julian still doesn't understand. Vincent tries to explain it to him in a more understandable way. A martial artist needs to use mana to possess strength beyond a normal human. The mana that causes miracles is stored in the heart of a human, but having the heavenly exoskeleton means that mana can be stored in the bones, above the heart. That means that the one who possesses it will be able to use mana infinitely. Julian still doesn't understand the importance of what Vincent is talking about, and that is that Cajun, whom everyone calls the Hero King, also possessed the heavenly exoskeleton. It's ironic, isn't it? Davin was reincarnated in a body with the physiognomy of Cajun, whom he envied all his life, but the world 500 years later is a stranger place than he had anticipated. In a flashback, Julian tells him that he cannot link the imagery to the heart. Vincent does not know what he means by imagery. This is imagery storage for mana. Seeing that he did not store mana in his heart, Vincent wonders about the method of meditation. Although Julian does not know exactly what kind of meditation method he is talking about. Vincent mentions that Falker, the first Adanka, had a great meditation method to store mana in the heart. In Julian's time, they store the mana in the imagery and call each one a star. The number of stars used represents the strength of the martial artist. Long ago they eliminated the method of storing mana in the physical body. There are not even records of them. Yes, nowadays they use SD cards to store mana. In conclusion, this means that an adult of the family creates at least one imagery. Linking an imagery for the first time and feeling the mana are the requirements of a star. Imagery was created to avoid the risks of storing mana in the heart in the past. More than half of the martial artists died storing mana in their hearts because they exploded. However, Vincent starts storing mana in his heart, this because he is a strong heart. He has to risk everything if he wants to be recognized as a proper martial artist. One-armed Davin learned this method and grew up that way. Julian interrupts Vincent because he notices that mana is flowing everywhere, then mentions the circuit formula. There is a formula for using mana efficiently, though in Davin's time they did it by mere touch. Though not all of them succeeded, more than half died. Julian asks him to take it easy and use his body properly, as if it were precious, and indeed it is, which is why Vincent asks Julian why he did that to his own body. That body was born with heavenly exoskeleton, and with a strong heart and magic power circuit. Julian would certainly have succeeded if he had grown up with proper training in the Samian family. The heavenly exoskeleton is a bone structure that allows him to store mana, but it also needs mana to be stored, and his heavenly exoskeleton has been starving for mana for over 13 years. At that rate, Vincent Aninka's body will die without having reached adulthood. Later, Vincent meditates. He knows it will prevent the body's condition from getting worse, but there is a limit. He may only have about 10 years left. And that is more than enough time for Storm Sword to become Emperor of the Sword and for Davin with one arm to be forgotten by the world. It is the time Davin spent starving while imprisoned as he longed for life. Those 10 years were no doubt terrifying and absurdly long. Next, someone knocks on the door and then enters. It is Vincent's servant. His name is Wilson, the same one that Julian said he would slit his throat 3 years later. Don't think too hard, that boy had some very twisted thoughts. Vincent asks Wilson to bring him some clean clothes. Wilson is surprised, as he notices that Vincent seems to be stronger than usual, then asks him what he has been doing to make the room such a mess. Wilson thinks Vincent has been learning dark magic or something, so he wants to alert the Grand Chamberlain and inform the Patriarch. Vincent slowly approaches and threateningly tells Wilson to do his job, as that is what he is supposed to do. He is supposed to be the servant, but he doesn't want to do things he doesn't feel like doing. But Vincent makes it clear that he is a servant. Since it looks like he won't do anything, Vincent decides to go to the big chamberlain that Wilson talked about to ask for clean clothes, as well as telling him that he had to go himself because his servant, Wilson, doesn't want to work. This makes Wilson suddenly want to do his job, and he'll do the cleaning too. As cowardly and sensitive as Vincent is, a servant cannot be so insolent and arrogant. They must have put him in that position on purpose. Julian thinks the same. They probably want Vincent to solve the issue of a defiant and rude servant to show how the 7th young lord of Aninka should be. Julian mentions that Wilson used to be a gang member and that he also killed a lot of people. Vincent does not believe this to be true, as a person who has killed many has a certain energy, and he does not feel anything at all coming from Wilson, as he has 2 innocent eyes. Moreover, he feels that he is also a coward. Julian asks him how he is sure of what he said. Vincent is sure of all this because he has lived such a life. Julian is frightened, as he believes he summoned something more terrifying than a spirit king. Because let's remember that Julian doesn't know that the identity of who is in Vincent's body is Davin himself. Wilson finished doing the laundry and cleaning Vincent's room. Wilson notices that Vincent is more submissive. Vincent asks him for a 1-meter wooden sword, weighing about 500 grams, and it must be made of black smelling wood. There are supposed to be tons like this in the family warehouse. Wilson refuses. If this is the case, Vincent would have to go on his own, of course, and tell the warehouse keeper that he is there in person because Wilson refused to follow orders, which is a problem. Wilson did not know this, but warehouse keepers are exceptional martial artists and very loyal to the direct descendants of the family. Wilson asks him why he is acting like that again and when he tries to touch him. Vincent responds by knocking him down, as he has bad memories of being attacked from behind. Despite having done that, Vincent's body was writhing in pain. Wilson gets up. It looks like he had something to say, but he finally agrees to follow Vincent's orders, although he clearly didn't want to at first. Wilson is upset and doesn't want to lose to Vincent ever again. Wilson brings the sword to Vincent in a bad way. Vincent comments that he knows well a person who has no right arm and who has led a hard life until he met a terrible end. This makes Wilson's attitude change again and he hands over the weapon properly, even though it is embarrassing for him. Vincent needs proper training, so he begins to undertake it. He knows that the heavenly exoskeleton he has is extremely weak, but he did not expect to be so tired after wielding the wooden sword a few times. However, it is a good feeling. Everything indicated that this body was born to be a martial artist. Moments later, a guy appears and cuts the test dummy in half. His name is Ravan Aninka and Vincent is definitely not someone he likes. Julian explains that Ravan Aninka is a very collateral descendant. He is also one of the candidates who is predicted to win the True Swords Assembly. The guy from before was this guy's father. Julian warns him to be careful, as he is a rising star, the most skilled among the 13-year-olds in the Aninka family. As for Ravan, he figured that if he won in the True Sword Assembly, he would have to fight Vincent, which is why he came to find him. The True Sword Assembly is a competition that brings together numerous sons of martial families that are related to the Adanka family to fight with true swords. Although there is no age restriction, people usually participate in this event from the age of 14. The winner of the True Sword Assembly has the opportunity to fight against a direct descendant of the Adanka family who is the same age. That direct descendant who will fight against the winner of the competition will be Vinchin, who in theory is considered the weakest of the direct descendants. Ravan thinks Vinchin is afraid, but on the contrary, in fact, he tells him that even provocations should have a certain level of dignity and class. He is annoyed that Ravan went there to mock him. The Davin without an arm was respected both in the training camp and in the combat arena. Even Kajin respected him. Vinchin tells Ravan that it was his father who taught him such manners. This makes Ravan angry, so he decides not to forgive him now that Vinchin disrespected his father. Julian warns him that Ravan is at 2-star level and possesses the attributes of a man of steel. He must be careful as Ravan in theory is stronger than Vinchin. This he knows. If they fight now he will lose, but he can't stand that feeling of inferiority that Ravan was raised with as a collateral descendant. Ravan is using mana even though he knows Vinchin can't do it. This boy's father doesn't act like an adult, and his son doesn't know the etiquette of being a martial artist. Vinchin has to set him straight. He tells him that in his time, someone like Ravan would have taken a beating from the elders of a family. They both pointed their swords at each other. Ravan knows that Vinchin has no mana. However, the atmosphere he was in implied that Vinchin could cut him down anytime he wanted to. Vinchin stops things there and warns Ravan that in the assembly of the true swords, things won't end with just wooden swords. That makes Ravan burst out in anger and try to attack him. Ravan is about to attack him and Vinchin doesn't even seem to have any intention of dodging. This because he knows Ravan can't hurt him, and so it is, a guy arrives to stop Ravan. If he had hurt Vinchin, it would have been a problem. Ravan tells Vinchin that they will meet at the assembly of the true swords. Julian asks Vinchin why he provoked Ravan earlier. He replies that all he did was teach a disrespectful child a lesson. Vinchin is trying to learn all about that era through Julian. He was looking at some portraits. Julian tells him that now that they are done with the image theory, the blessings and traits follow. The traits are artificially made from the analyzed power of the blessings. A man-made blessing. Vinchin asks Julian if he is able to make blessings, as this is disrespectful to the gods. Julian replies that no one has died yet from divine punishment. Vinchin mentions that Ravan also has a trait, Man of Steel. Julian explains that the Dwarf King's blessings include many things, but this trait focuses on strengthening the body. The more you grind a specific trait, the stronger paths it opens up. That's called a family tree. Man of Steel is a mid-level trait. Defense and destructive power is the speciality of this trait. If this were the case, the martial teachings would lean to one side. But Julian mentions that this makes them strong quickly. And it is just as Julian says, since the dummy cut by Ravan earlier is an achievement incomparable to someone from Davin's time. To compete with people like that, Vinchin needs to get used to those skills. Vinchin continues training. The people there notice that he is using only his left hand, so they think that Vinchin won't be able to use imagery that way. Plus he starts panting after a few hits. However, this guy, Vice Leader Merlin, tells them not to speak so rashly about Vinchin. Although Merlin wants to defend Vinchin, looking at him, it is normal that people feel free to call him the shame of Adanka, as he is a guy who wields the sword aimlessly, without any mana or trait, destined to be despised by people. Since everyone was whispering as they watched Vinchin, Julian proposes to go train in a forest, but Vinchin is used to being looked down upon in the first place, remembering that no one expected Davin to single-handedly beat Kajin. But he did, and exchanged the booze for praise. Next, Merlin gives Vinchin an advanced recovery potion, which will make training easier. Merlin introduces himself to him. Vinchin is surprised that he isn't laughing, although to be honest, he did at first. But Merlin noticed that Vinchin's eyes seem to be desperately searching for something. Vinchin tells Merlin that he will remember his name. Hours pass and Vinchin continues to train, both physically and theoretically, balancing on his right leg, turning his hip, feeling the mana in his heart. He has begun to see it, remembered the way to defeat Kajin. A path of swords made and stacked with dots and lines to manifest skills. Next, he hits the practice dummy and manages to cut it in two. It worked. His sword strike is complete. Later, Wilson is annoyed that Vinchin's training only gives him more work to do. He then serves Vinchin breakfast. Vinchin immediately realizes that Wilson blatantly stole some of the food. He didn't even wipe his mouth. Vincent can let it go this time, but is clear with him he doesn't want him to cross the line. Next, Wilson starts to threaten him by telling him that he used to be a gangster who killed a lot of people. Evidently, this doesn't provoke fear in Vincent, who through telepathy tells Wilson that controlling through fear is easy, but useless. That's why he doesn't push him with power. Wilson is surprised, as he didn't expect Vincent to be able to use mana. Vincent tells Wilson to stop acting proud in front of him and stand by his side, as soon he will not be ashamed to be Vincent Adanka's property. Vincent gives him two choices: be ruled by fear or show loyalty. Wilson leaves and denies that any loyalty is formed towards him, although his face after leaving said the opposite. Merlin wanders around the training ground and notices that Vincent finished training earlier in the day. But that's not the only thing, because he also notices that Vincent managed to cut a dummy. He thinks he did it with a real blade, but from what he saw, Vincent only used wooden swords. It takes a lot of skill to pull off a cut like that. Merlin wonders what kind of martial arts Vincent is learning. The idiot Wilson has become very polite. Next, Vincent mentions something about the clothes, which are made of Levadine cotton, which is very profitable but ruins the floor. It's not something good enough to be worn by a nobleman. Besides that, the food. The quality is low compared to the family budget. This means there is someone stealing money. They might suspect Wilson, but he has no idea what they are talking about. It's definitely not him. It must be someone higher up. Ravan is training, while remembering how intimidating Vincent looked with a mere wooden sword. But he doesn't seem afraid at all. In fact, it makes him angry. His father goes to see him, tells him that there is not much time for the assembly of the true swords, makes it clear that if they want to escape from that life of poverty and the pain of the branch families, Ravan must defeat Vincent. Ravan must become the only member of the branch family to overthrow the main family. Ravan's father seems to be getting more and more irritable as the assembly approaches. He is becoming more and more obsessed. Ravan wants to defeat Vincent, because that way, both his father and his family can go back to the way they were before. We return to Julian, who has found out information about the people who participate in the True Swords competition. Not just personal information, but the techniques they use and their habits, which is incredibly frightening. But Julian takes it as a compliment. Julian's plan was to make an eye-catching debut at the True Swords assembly by borrowing the strength of the Spirit King, and also the Miracle Stone, the mana crystal given to the champion. If ingested, the body and mana are instantly strengthened. From the information he has gathered and the expression he shows, Vincent knows that Julian wants to win. It would be a disgrace as a martial artist if he loses, even if he has all those tools at his disposal. Vincent tells him that although he may not be the spiritual king he was hoping for, he will see to it that he gives him a much more valuable victory. Next, Vincent calls Wilson, as he needs him to do something for him. He needs Wilson to go see the great Chamberlain Raelsa. Just being in front of her intimidates him. Wilson tells Raelsa that Vincent had something to tell the head of the family. He asked that the head of the family observe the assembly of the True Swords directly, as Vincent said he would prove his worth as a member of the main Adanka family. Raelsa mentions that the head of the family has never observed that competition, and has no time or reason to do so. Then Wilson mentions that this is the cost of embezzling the budget, surprising Raelsa. After Wilson leaves, she thinks that Vincent could have come for himself. It would have been more effective to threaten him himself. But he sent Wilson to show authority. Has Vincent understood Raelsa's intentions? Raelsa goes to the head of the family, Patriarch Khan, to tell him that Vincent has invited her to the assembly of the True Swords. The attitude of the head of the family is rather cold, and although Vincent has said he would show his worth, he does not believe he is skilled enough to speak of the value of the lineage he carries. Raelsa asks him to please attend the event, even telling him that if Vincent cannot prove his worth, she will give her head in exchange. The chief doesn't understand why she is doing all this. Raelsa says it is because Vincent has taken advantage of a weakness of hers. The chief already knew about the budget embezzlement, though he acknowledges that it must be something she did on purpose for Vincent's sake, as she intended to use that money for his future. Khan says he has no reason to interfere, since strictly speaking, Raelsa is that woman's servant, not his, yet he recognizes that this kind of method is really like her. Expressing all his intentions towards him without losing a bit of dignity, is he really Sarvana's son? Anyway, Raelsa wins. The chief will attend the assembly of the True Swords. The day of the real swords assembly has finally arrived. The competitors enter the arena. Ravan is determined to defeat Vincent. Noticing Khan's presence, Ravan is surprised. He is sure that he is there to see his performance, for after all, Ravan is the rising star. He does not want to miss the opportunity to defeat Vincent in front of the Patriarch. The assembly of the true swords begins. Ravan has his first confrontation, which he manages to win easily, making his father stand up proud. No wonder they call Ravan the rising star. After all, he is young and already has 2 stars, plus the defense attribute he possesses is impressive. It was very likely that a collateral descendant would win the competition for the first time. Vincent was watching. Based on the standards of 500 years ago, everyone there is a genius. But they have no depth in martial arts. The strength they have comes mainly from individual traits. Vincent sees no fighting experience in those moves. It's like they are dancing puppets. That's probably why Ravan is able to use traits and attack so recklessly. Ravan thinks Vincent will run away, but Vincent won't run anywhere. The fights continued. Ravan kept climbing until he finally beat all the competitors he had. That's when he shows himself in front of Khan, and just as the laws set their dictate, he wants to fight Vincent as the last fight of the assembly of the true swords. Vincent doesn't think twice and accepts the challenge. Both go to the fighting arena. The referee, Zeron, belonging to the white sword unit, will be in charge of starting. But Vincent interrupts, as he has a condition. He will use the wooden sword and his left hand to fight. Moreover, he will let Ravan have 3 attacks first. Until these 3 attacks are completed, Vincent will not move a single step. Ravan asks him what the hell he is doing. He thinks he is making fun of him even now. The audience thought this was absurd and that Vincent knows nothing about martial arts. Ravan's father steps in to say that Vincent is only doing this to make excuses when he loses, but Khan will allow Vincent's conditions. However, he makes it clear to him that he better prove words with actions. The fight is about to start. They both prepare, and it finally begins. Ravan wastes no time and attacks immediately. The first attack is likely to be a short stab. Most of the attacks are feints. The real attack would be the second stab. Vincent thinks Ravan's moves are so obvious that he can see them even without Julian's information. First of all, big swords are not made for stabbing, so he deflects the attack with one hand. Ravan is surprised, because for something like that to happen, Vincent has to be much stronger than him. Vincent let him have 2 attacks first. He has only 1 attack left. But Ravan gets angry at the arrogance Vincent is showing and tries to attack with everything. But it doesn't work. Vincent manages to grab him by one arm and knock him down. The 3 attacks are complete. It's now or never. Vincent prepares to fulfill the promise he made to Julian and father. Now it's his turn to attack. Everyone was surprised that Ravan had knelt before Vincent. His father, angry, asks him why he's having so much trouble against someone who can't use mana. Ravan doesn't know what's going on, much less Julian, who hasn't seen it clearly. Vincent replies that it's a basic unarmed fight. Standing there dumbfounded because you don't have a blade is not the way of a true martial artist, meaning there are many ways to suppress an opponent without weapons. Ravan mentions that he understands now. Vincent has obtained a trait, one given by a small minor god. This is no problem for Vincent. If it makes things easier for him, let him keep thinking like that. Ravan prepares to attack again. Vincent manages to dodge him and prepares to counterattack by punching him in the neck. However, this does not hurt Ravan, as a practiced sword will never be able to break through the defenses of a man of steel, a broken heavenly exoskeleton and an untrained body. Vincent won't be able to use great strength yet, but if Ravan gains confidence, he will attack again with the same method. So Vincent, using the power of him punching downwards, hits him in the stomach, then tells referee Zeron to do his best to prevent a tragedy. Vincent only has one chance. If he uses that ability just once, his body will collapse. He must finish that fight while Ravan is still in the air. Ravan tries to defend himself, but Vincent can see through the attacks, the mysterious path of swords that will connect the 2 points. He tells Julian to look carefully. This is the sword he mastered. Vincent manages to hit him, drawing the attention of even the Patriarch Khan. Vincent slashes into space and twists the flow of mana, using the sword to cut through everything, including the enemy's ability. That is the absolute sword. Ravan complains of pain in his arm, as Vincent's blow tore it off. Vincent tells Zeron to stop the fight at once, as there is a winner, Vincent Adinka. Ravan's father enters the battlefield to help tend to his son's wounds. They must call the priest. Vincent had warned the referee. He told him to stop before a tragedy occurred. Despite keeping his composure, Vincent's body is on edge, but this is no time to collapse. Vincent turns to Khan and tells him that he kept the promise. After that, Khan gives as the winner of the True Swords Assembly to Vincent. After that, they prepare for the awarding. Vincent will be given a miracle stone as a reward. Ravan's father bursts in completely angry, as he believes that Vincent used dirty tricks and borrowed the power of an apostle. The priest tells Khan that there is a problem. Ravan's arm will not be attached to his body again. Ravan's father refused to accept that his son would live with only one arm, even blaming the priest for not being able to heal him. But it's a type of injury they've never seen before. It is not only something they have not seen before, but it seems that Ravan was cut by something that the priest's divine powers cannot handle. They must hurry, otherwise even a high priest will not be able to fix the situation. Ravan's father enhances the theory that Vincent used dirty tricks. Vincent asks Khan if he can respond to the accusations, who gives him permission. Vincent mentions that the assembly of the true swords was held in the presence of the patriarch Khan. Therefore, all proceedings are considered to be approved with the authority of the patriarch, and the patriarch has authorized Vincent as the final winner. Therefore, the words of Ravan's father, Charles, directly negate the authority of the patriarch. Vincent orders Zeron, belonging to the White Sword unit, to arrest Charles because he mocked the patriarch's authority in public. Zeron arrests Charles, then the patriarch intervenes to tell Charles that he is indebted to Vincent, for if he had not been there, Charles would have had to face the family sanctions. Khan will let the situation pass, but asks him not to open his mouth again. Julian seems to look happy, as it is a valuable experience to be praised by the patriarch. But back to Ravan. At this rate, the right arm will be lost forever. Then Julian whispers something to Vincent, making it clear that it would definitely be a chance in his favor. Vincent asks the priest if he can't fix the arm with the miracle stone. After all, it was Vincent who cut off Ravan's right arm. It would be nice if he could put an end to it. Patriarch Khan agrees. Ravan approaches Charles and frees him using a sword. However, in helping him, it will be an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. For Ravan's right arm will need someone else's right arm. Vincent thinks about Charles being a loser, as he refuses to say anything despite the situation. Is a right arm that important to him? I guess it is. Charles agrees to sacrifice his right arm. Apparently, even though he was acting like an idiot, he loved his son. As Charles was about to cut off his arm, Zeron intervenes on Vincent's orders to stop Charles from removing his arm. Vincent tells Charles that he hopes that next time he will use all that courage for a better cause. That said, it is resolved. Khan gives the miracle stone to Vincent, who immediately gives it to the priest, who begins to use it in the hope of recovering Ravan's arm miraculously. Seconds later, Ravan gets his arm back. The healing of Ravan was Julian's idea, although it's a pity because that stone could have been used to quench the thirst of the heavenly exoskeleton. While this was going on, Wilson was listening to everything behind the door, thinking how great Vincent was. Then he remembers what he had told him earlier, and finally decides to be loyal to Vincent. Wilson now decides to give complete loyalty to Vincent. Next, the priest goes to see Vincent. His name is Dulin, a priest who worships Gaia. He is there to express gratitude to him for the matter before, and surprisingly, he gives him back the miracle stone. Dulin gives it to him because making those who suffer first rise up and laugh until they are happy is the reason why he became a priest. Moreover, seeing how Vincent acted, he compared the value of the miracle stone to a human life. And as Vincent willingly gave up the miracle stone, it made Dulin reflect. Vincent tells him that he did nothing. Dulin simply realized it himself. However, accepting back the stone would be the proper way to respect Dulin. In addition to the miracle stone, Dulin gives Vincent a card in case he ever needs the temple's help. Dulin has become a second-class priest, although that is not yet public knowledge. Julian is surprised, since being a second-class priest means having unlimited treatment, free use of the staff, plus the card from before is the same as telling them treat me like a second-class priest. Although Vincent doesn't even know what second-class means. Dulin says goodbye. Julian is happy because now they have something much better than Wilson. Julian is a little weak to praise, and speaking of praise, father usually eats alone. But there was a time when he invited one of the Adanka family members to dine with him after the assembly of the true swords. That person was the second daughter, Dea. She had an overwhelming victory in the assembly of the true swords. The point is that there is a 50% chance that the same thing will happen with Vincent that night. Although his body feels stiff, then he starts to prepare himself even though it was not so sure that he would be invited to the dinner. Moments later, Wilson enters to tell Vincent that Boss Khan has invited him to dinner, just what Vincent expected. On the way to dinner, Vincent meets his stepmother, who congratulates him on winning the competition. Vincent's real mother passed away after giving birth to him. The stepmother's name is Versa Hylame. Before her retirement, she was such a fierce martial artist that she was called a giant. Nowadays, she is in charge of everything related to the Adanka house. They both continue on to where Khan is waiting for them. The pressure Khan is exerting is so incredible that Vincent finds it hard to breathe. The atmosphere hasn't felt like this before. It means that the fact that he was invited must be a test for him. Vincent tells him that he doesn't think there is any need to purposely put pressure on him in a private meeting. This because Khan was supposed to be expecting him as a father, not as the head of the family. Khan acknowledges that Vincent was right to notice. He has called him for two reasons. The first is to congratulate him on today's victory, and the second is to see how valid Charles' concerns were. Next, Versa looks rather intimidatingly at Vincent. This to inspect him, Khan asks her if there is a chance that Vincent is an apostle, but she replies that he doesn't seem to be. Vincent feels a horrible sensation. It must be Versa's speciality. She possesses eyes that can see through the truth. Khan asks Versa what kind of martial art Vincent uses, since he has not yet been able to link an image to the heart. How could he cut off Ravan's arm, who is a 2-star martial artist? Versa answers that Vincent's ability is similar to the sword of the hero king. Yes, to Kajin Samian. He wielded his sword in strange ways and was said to devour any evil ability. It was also said that his sword was able to subdue the demon Davin. Again, a fabricated story leaves Davin as the loser when he was not. Versa approaches Vincent and asks him to speak. How did he learn that swordplay that resembles Kajin's? Vincent thought it was Khan who called him, but that conversation is being handled by Versa. He is being questioned about the origins of his martial arts. Julian desperately asks Vincent not to answer Versa's question, as she is able to tell truth from lies with her eyes. If Vincent says sloppy excuses, she will definitely get suspicious. But then what should he do? Tell her that he is not her son, but actually someone from 500 years ago. Julian says he will take care of it, although the truth is that he is afraid of being caught acting useless. But Vincent calms him down and tells him that it is just one step to overcome his fears. Vincent will take the first step for him. He tells Versa that he has received a revelation. This alerts Versa, as he received a revelation without any blessing. In most situations, you cannot receive revelations without blessings unless they are bad. Julian had not told Vincent this. Seeing that he was acting suspiciously, Versa threatens to take him to the trial of the Holy Court. Julian asks Vincent to say the same as him. He says that if he finds him suspicious, then he can check with the temple. However, if he is evil, couldn't a priest who has a rank 3 miracle stone recognize him? That miracle stone had been given to Dulin by Versa. It is the one Vincent received as a gift earlier. Using his eyes, he realizes that Vincent is not lying. He then asks him if he really learned swordplay through a revelation. He replies that he learned a lot through revelations. However, swordplay he did not learn there. He mentions that he has always been able to read the mysterious movements of the sword. However, he had contemplated for a few days whether he should learn that. But he wanted to change, even though it might incur suspicion from numerous people. He thought it would be cowardly not to do anything. Julian's truth and Vincent's truth, their two truths can face each other in Versa's eyes. Together they say that only then can they overcome the Samian family and fulfill the long mission of the Adanka family. He wanted to show how he has become stronger to the many family members, Khan included, because he thought he would be able to make the right judgment. Khan rubs his chin. Versa quickly realizes that he does that when he is satisfied with something. Khan's decision is for Vincent to continue training martial arts. Versa tells Khan that she is sure he knows that Kajin's skill is similar to that of the Demon King Davin. If Vincent uses the Hero King's sword, the Samian family will make a fuss and say that they have stolen it. But they would not have to say anything if the Great Demon King's sword is used instead. Since Khan has given his approval, he will be responsible for everything, so Vincent must do his best to improve himself and not cause trouble. Vincent knows that this is not a simple warning. She is confirming the Patriarch's decision and also giving him her approval. Khan tells Vincent that she has shown great results in the assembly of the true swords. That is why Khan will grant her something she desires. Vincent wants to be stronger. Julian whispers to Vincent to ask Khan to let him go to the family library. Only 3-star martial artists are allowed in there. Khan asks him if he has managed to link the ideas in his heart. Vincent replies that he hasn't been able to, so he would like to take that opportunity to behave like a spoilt child. Khan agrees, allowing Vincent to enter the lower library, then tells Versa to give Vincent the Crimson Lotus, the reward for fulfilling his promise to him. The Crimson Lotus is the sword that Khan used when he was young and began to make a name for himself in the world. It is practically the history of the Adanka family. Julian is happy for what they have achieved, but Vincent makes it clear to him that they will achieve much more in the future. At first, Julian was disappointed that Vincent was not the Spirit King, but he doesn't think he was able to achieve as much by summoning the Spirit King as he had anticipated. he can definitely trust Vincent with his body. Later, Vincent is about to leave with Wilson, but Verson calls out to him. She tells him that she is very proud of him for what he has achieved. She mentions that since he has won against Ravan, he should enter the Crimson Fortress according to custom. The Crimson Fortress is one of the few training institutes that the Adanka family has. Only those who complete the training at the fortress will be recognized as full martial artists. The requirements for entry would be to win the assembly of the true swords and the subjugation of the low-ranking demon, the Crimson Demon. Vincent replies to Verson that he is not sure yet. She realizes that Vincent's strange movements with the sword make his body suffer. Then she tells him that there is no way to finish off the Crimson Demon in one attack, so Vincent will die if he fights him in his current state. Versa is advising him. She seems to have taken a liking to Vincent. This because it is very likely that she knows something of his story. With the eye that discovers the lie and the new appointment of the Lord, she could have framed Vincent for anything she wanted, but she didn't. Vincent interrupts her and thanks her for the advice. She was trying to explain the Crimson Demon trait, but Vincent left without asking. No doubt he is a fearless martial artist. Versa is happy, as today, Sarvana's son has taken a big step as a martial artist. Wilson was at work and meets this girl, Sari, who immediately complains to him because she thinks Wilson is messing with Vincent. But realizing how loyal he is now, she wonders if he is the same Wilson as before. Wilson tells Sari that Vincent is in the library where only the family's martial artists can enter. In there, Vincent finds no records from 500 years ago. Only that time period is missing, as if it has been removed. There are only children's stories about the Demon King and the Hero King. At this point, Julian suspects that someone erased the records from 500 years ago. The sword skill too, someone erased it or changed it. Vincent will take care of that later. For now, he must increase the number of his sword skill to defeat the Crimson Demon. He needs a training method before the imagery theory, as right now he cannot reach imagery. Julian asks Vincent for his true identity. He knows that if he reveals that he is the great demon Davin, Julian will be shocked. However, it would not be respectful, as he is the previous owner of the body he has now and they both share the same fate. Vincent reveals to Julian his identity. However, upon saying his name, Julian starts acting weird. There is an unbearable sound in his ear. That is why Julian doesn't want to know anymore. Vincent finds a book called First Love with a Watermill. Why is there a book like that in the mana trading? The odds of a romance book sneaking in there are low, so Vincent knows right away that someone kept secrets and that they are in that book. But at first glance, it is a normal romance book. After reading a bit, Vincent tells Julian that the character in that book has no images, but if it has the power of love as a trait, it is not a normal novel. Traits should not be used to induce the flow of mana, but the manifestation of traits should be done by making mana flow. To achieve that, the whole theory of imagery has to be discarded. With imagery, the freedom of mana makes all these things possible. The book tells of a person who piled up mana without imagery and lived. With the help of that book, they will be able to manifest traits as well. Julian warns that learning a trait is dangerous, even with the help of imagery, and a trait is a wealth for a martial artist, so they will not easily teach the flow as well, but they definitely found a clue to become stronger. Vincent wants to go for tests, but on his way out he meets Sari, who already knows everything that has happened and is proud of him. Vincent doesn't know who she is. Julian tells him that Sari is a maid who had left for a while because of a situation in her family. Despite everything, there was someone who gave blind affection to someone like Vincent. Next, Ravan appears, who has something to say to Vincent. They both go to a room, but the atmosphere is quite tense. Moments later, Ravan mentions that he is there to repay the debt to Vincent for the assembly of the true swords. Everything indicated that Ravan would attack. Vincent did not expect it. The same methods will not work against Ravan. Vincent asks Sari to flee from there, but she refuses. But surprisingly, Ravan wasn't there to fight. He acknowledges that Vincent forgave him and gave him the miracle stone so he could restore his arm. He has regained everything, his arm and his father, but he has not been able to give anything back. Ravan admits he was a coward, but he wants to stop being a coward. The best he can do now is to swear loyalty to Vincent. Still, it was not a hopeless case, although Julian desperately does not want to believe what Ravan says. But he placed his sword in Vincent's direction. It is an act of giving life to someone as a martial artist. He is serious. Julian won't trust Ravan, but he has an idea. Vincent accepts Ravan's oath, and will also stand by him until the moment he betrays him. Ravan realizes that Vincent's sword is the Crimson Lotus, so he'll make sure he won't regret swearing allegiance. Happy Sari looks at how Vincent has changed. The times when he was called a loser are long gone. Julian wants to try something to gain the traits of Ravan's Dwarven King's blessing. From there we see Versa, who talks to Khan and tells him that Vincent plans to join the Crimson Fortress next year. As for conquering the Crimson Demon, Versa tells him the truth. She was going to inform him about the specifics of the demon. But Vincent refused to listen. Crimson demons can only attack with mana of 3rd star or higher, as they have no physical form. The reason conquest is a rite of passage is to see the way someone faces a demon and see proof that they have mana higher than 3rd star. Versa noticed that Ravan began to visit Vincent more, to the point of residing there. Vincent was training, Ravan was guiding him. This he does to try and gain the Dwarf King's blessing. But they will do so with the methods of the book before, as Vincent has no imagery. Here Ravan's loyalty is tested. As for that, Vincent must meditate at his side. Ravan feels somewhat pathetic, but does not consider it a bad thing. It is the first time that a defeat feels so good. However, he did not expect that there would be someone who would use such crazy methods in the direct lineage. Julian tries to guide Vincent, because even though Vincent is meditating, he is doing whatever he wants, putting his life on the line a bit. Ravan tells Vincent that he is too spontaneous. He should take it easy, but this is how Vincent has lived. Even before, when he was Davin, he couldn't win anything without risking his own life. The meditation intensifies. Julian fears that Vincent will die at that rate, but Vincent will force a little more. The flow will be completed if he manages to connect it, but Ravan tries to stop him as it is too early to do that. Vincent manages to connect both flows, but a big explosion occurs. Vincent is fine, but he tried to do too much. What he tried took Ravan half a year. Back to these two. Khan mentions that it's half a year until the next Crimson Fortress entrance. This event may be an easy one for Vincent as he's already defeated a 2-star martial artist. That's why Khan will give Vincent a month to defeat the Crimson Demon. Raelsa is in charge of taking this message to Vincent. She is worried because a month is too little time. When she enters the room, she finds a complete mess. Both Vincent and Ravan injured from the explosion earlier. She asks for a good explanation for everything. Vincent tells Raelsa that he was just meditating a little. Whatever the meditation is. Raelsa tells him that he must hurry. Next, she gives him Khan's message. He must finish the rite of passage in a month. Julian is surprised. As far as he knew, no time limit had ever been set before, but that means Khan already has high expectations of Vincent. Until a month has passed, Raelsa will accompany Vincent personally as protector, so she expects him to do his best. Ravan is worried, as it will take Vincent at least 2 months to get the Dwarf King's blessing. Vincent knows he must hurry. On the other hand, Seri does not want him to exert himself so much. Next, he notices that Seri has a large amount of mana, but asks him to leave as he has something to discuss with Ravan. Ravan tells him that 1 month is not enough, they must find a different way. Then Vincent meditates again and shows Ravan the mana circuit. To everyone's surprise, he has completed the flow. With that he can easily reach the manifestation. There will be no need to wait for a month. It will definitely exceed Khan's expectations. 2 weeks later, Vincent trains in the forest. He will start with the manifestation of the traits, then warns that there could be an explosion like last time, so he tells Ravan to back off, but Ravan insists on staying by his side. Vincent begins. Julian has a strange feeling. Then the Dwarf King manifests before them, though only Julian seems to be able to see him. The Dwarf King prepares to attack, but not to harm. This is the blessing of the Dwarf King. The first trait of defense, strengthening the body. It is the step before the Man of Steel. Ravan was surprised. Vincent made it and it hasn't even been a month. With that, Vincent will be able to overcome the burden of the Absolute Sword. He has succeeded in laying the foundation for the subjugation of the Crimson Demon. Vincent thanks Ravan, but there is another favor he wants to ask of him. 2 days later, Vincent prepares to go to the Crimson Demon's lair. Vincent makes a sudden request to Raelsa, as it hasn't been a month yet. She is concerned about this. She mentions that she has protected those who participate in that rite of passage 3 times. Both Khan and Vincent's brothers and the others in the history of the Adanka line. And there has not been one who has failed the test, so definitely, Sarvana's son cannot be the first to fail the test. Sarvana is Vincent's mother, in case it's still not clear. Vincent tells Raelsa that she has nothing to worry about. He got this. They are on their way to the mission. Vincent doesn't like the idea of having a guardian on a mission like that, but Julian tells him that there is a loot from the Crimson Demon. Besides, Vincent must be watched. Raelsa asks Vincent if he has studied about the Crimson Demon. He tells him that he needs 3 stars plus mana. That is the first step to subjugate the demon, and in Raelsa's eyes, Vincent still doesn't reach 3 stars. Vincent tells him not to worry. The Crimson Demon is the first monster Vincent will have to subjugate. It's not a monster he has to study for. Raelsa warns him not to let his guard down. Railsa strives to help Vincent because she is Vincent's guardian and protector. Vincent again reminds Railsa of the budget embezzlement, and suspects she gave him a weakness to latch onto on purpose. But no matter, if Railsa doesn't want to talk about it, that's fine, since she didn't ask about Vincent's training. They are even. Moments later, they finally arrive at the Crimson Demon's lair, though it has no exact name. It is called the Old Temple, this in memory of Father Arslan, after taking down one of the remains of the great demon Davin. Arslan again. In addition to the Crimson Demon, Vincent believes it is no coincidence. That said, Railsa prepares to create a mana barrier. It is a level that only allows a single monster to pass through the barrier. Next, the Crimson Demon appears before them. Vincent unsheathes his sword and tells Railsa to look carefully and report back exactly what she will see. The Crimson Demon attacks Vincent. Julian tells him to dodge and then get a good path to use Absolute Sword Slash. But Vincent refuses, as increasing the distance between the two will be more advantageous to the one with the longer weapon. For Vincent, it is better to get closer, and that is what he does. Vincent crashes his blade into the demon, while telling him not to even think about using the scythe. Attacking up close against a big weapon is good, but Railsa could see how Vincent's performance was incredible even though it was his first real fight at the age of 14. It was as if he had enough experience after having subjugated the Crimson Demon many times before. The Dwarf King's trait is incredible. It allows Vincent to move an untrained body in a very optimal way. But that is only the basis for finding the way of the sword for Absolute Sword Slash. Next, Vincent sees the opportunity to increase the distance between the two. The Crimson Demon is very aggressive, however. He must be stressed after constantly defending himself, so the next attack he will use will be a big one, which will make him have a lot of openings. Against an opponent with a lot of openings, it is very easy to get the sword path. Vincent will reduce the recoil of Absolute Sword Slash with his trait. Moments later, Vincent manages to defeat the Crimson Demon, or so he thought, because he doesn't know that the reason why you can't subdue the Crimson Demon with a single attack is because the Crimson Demon has a second life. The Crimson Demon attacks Vincent using its other life. However, Vincent manages to cut it down. Even that is the same as 500 years ago, but the demon is quite fast. Even its appearance has changed, which means that they evolved over those 500 years. When a Crimson Demon is revived, it goes crazy. The speed and strength they have increases. Vincent keeps dodging the attacks. It is quite dangerous. Besides, the retreat route on the wall is blocked. The demon gives no respite. Next, Julian mentions the temple to Vincent. He insists that they must change the plans, but Vincent wants to make the demon lower his guard. The demon thinks the same, to corner Vincent for a final attack. When the demon is fully prepared for the final attack, at that moment Vincent will carry out the plan. Railsa is a mere overseer, and if she were to interrupt, it would be a failure for Vincent, so she prays to Sarvana that her son can win. Next, Railsa has a flashback with Sarvana. She reached out to her. Railsa survived by stealing on the border of the country. Sarvana asked her to join her. At first, Railsa thought Sarvana was crazy. There she also met Khan and Versa. They had no choice but to accept Railsa joining them. However, Railsa ended up joining an adventure that would become the Legend of Adenka. They defeated an ogre. Railsa distracted while Sarvana attacked from behind. Sarvana was really strong and beautiful. She had the power to make people smile. In Railsa's life, Sarvana was a ray of light, until the day came when Sarvana died. This after giving birth to Vincent, but that was not the time to be sad. Railsa vowed to protect the child that Sarvana left behind from the hard life of being a direct lineage of Adenka, until he became a respectable martial artist. However, Vincent was despised even by his brothers. Railsa contemplated for 14 years the treatment Vincent received. The moment she learns that Vincent was recognized by Khan, she finally begins to see hope. She doesn't want Vincent to give up. The Crimson Demon is about to attack Vincent. Suddenly, Vincent calls Ravan and he appears to block the demon's attack. Railsa is surprised when she notices Ravan's presence. Then Vincent meditates on the situation. It is dangerous, because if Ravan is pushed and even a small impact hits him, Vincent will die. The fight between Ravan and the demon continues. He uses Man of Steel to block the demon's attacks, then provokes him, which causes the demon's fury. Ravan's sword can't get the effect of the Man of Steel. The Crimson Demon realizes that, so he aims straight at the sword until he manages to break it. Without a sword, Ravan won't be able to defend Vincent. The demon attacks with his scythe. Ravan manages to hold it for a very short time before he manages to cut him, but he won't be able to resist long. However, he did a good job, because Vincent had already completed the meditation. The Absolute Sword Slash technique was completed, and with one blow, Vincent manages to hit the Crimson Demon's core and finally defeats him. He then thanks Ravan for the help. While that was Vincent's plan, Raelsa congratulates him, but she's not sure Khan is okay with Vincent getting help. He's supposed to be there to exceed Khan's expectations, isn't he? Vincent tells Raelsa that she has controlled the mana barrier so that only one monster could be in it, because the first one already died. The other one will come in to get them. The subjugation before was for Ravan. In this one now, Vincent will prove himself. Next, Vincent eats the miracle stone to strengthen his body. Even with this, he can only use absolute sword slash twice. He is unable to measure the performance of the miracle stone. It is for that reason that he had to meditate. Vincent stiffens his body and waits for the right moment. The Crimson Demon's core is exposed as it regenerates from the damage it takes. Against an opponent who has so many openings, it is much easier to get a path for the sword. Using absolute sword slash, Vincent manages to cut the demon core in two. Raelsa was worrying for nothing. Vincent had a flawless performance. However, his body was completely fatigued. Julian wonders what kind of swordsmanship is that, to be in that state after using it a couple of times. The trait, the meditation, and the miracle stone. Without any of that it would not have been possible. Julian asks Vincent to lie down, as Raelsa will move him, but Vincent clarifies that it's like the assembly of the true swords. The real winner is the one who holds out in the end. Vincent refuses to fall. Everything seemed calm, but suddenly a summoning circle was activated. Raelsa was alerted. As she had never seen anything like this before, it was a relic guardian, or a Pokemon. However,